All right. Thanks so much for being on the Friends with Wheels podcast. If I could start off by by telling the audience, a little bit about you and how you started, we can go from there.
Well, I'm a mid-career person. I started as a political consultant many years ago, working on internet campaigns and online fundraising campaigns, but by night, always really cared about making work better for people who um, either managed mental illness or other challenges that might make sitting in an office, for 10 hours a day under bright lights a challenge for them. And so I began as a blogger and then started one podcast and now another podcast and have written books along the way. And my real passion is trying to, again, make work for everyone, but especially those of us who, were wired differently and were very ambitious and high achieving.
Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about the work that you do nowadays.
Well, the work that I do nowadays is really, I would say, about half content creation. I have my podcast called The Anxious Achiever, and I've just finished my third book, which is for people who are atypical achievers, whether they identify as neurodivergent or simply that they feel like their brain marches to a different drummer than other people's. And, I have my newsletter, and then half is about doing leadership trainings and leadership advising and public speaking to companies in the field of workplace mental health and mindful leadership.
Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about the work that you do on the ladder, with the public speaking, leadership advising and all that.
Um, I mean, I what should I tell you?
Yeah, just kind of unpack that a little bit more, I guess. Like,
um, yeah, I think that a lot of companies, organizations really are committed to trying to make work feel better for people, both from a psychosocial perspective, a work design perspective, um, just simply help people feel less stress and more burnt out, and less burnt out. And I, really help leaders and teams and audiences think about how to understand anxiety and stress in a way that gives them a little bit more agency over it and is a little bit more beneficial, and introduce concepts of workplace flexibility and work redesign so that people can embrace what they need and get what they need at work rather than, just being quiet and hoping that they can stick it out.
hmm yeah, because oftentimes, people, and I've talked to like people who've had to like were in one career, and then they said to me, I've done this, and I felt kind of burnt out, and I wanted to see a change in career. So yeah, I could pretty much relate to those people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Um, so tell me a little bit about the work that you do in content creation. What sorts of content do you post?
I have my podcast, The Anxious Achiever, which has been on the air for many years, and it's about half stories from people who manage mental illness, who have gone through really challenging periods in their lives, or who identify as neurodivergent, whether they manage mental illness and identify as neurodivergent or not. And I have a newsletter as well. And, I create videos and posts mostly on LinkedIn. That's my main channel
Mm-hmm.
because I really do try to reach a workplace audience.
Mm-hmm. And so who was like your favorite guest on your podcast that you've had that you've like, this person is someone I could relate to?
Oh gosh, I mean, I've had over 300 guests. It's hard to
Yeah.
it's hard to pick a favorite one, but I think for me, I'm always um, really happy and honored when people who have had really big impact in the world from their career are willing to come on and tell their story, not just for the sake of telling their story of struggle, but for sharing that fact that we all go through it, and that you can really learn from your challenges. And I think also I have a lot of leaders who come on, specifically maybe leaders with bipolar disorder, who have faced huge challenges, but also are able to look at the gifts that their mental illness offers them, as well as the challenges, because, when you have something like bipolar disorder, it walks with you in your life, and you can't get rid of it. You can treat it, but you have to accept it. And so it can be a really healing process when you come to see that it offers you both helps as well as hurts, as an
Mm-hmm.
example.
My next question is, tell me a little bit about when you're sort of preparing your like podcast episodes or figuring out which guests to have on your show. What's sort of your preparation? So how do you go about doing that? Because I remember when I started my podcast a couple of years ago, I used to have questions, of like what I'm gonna ask my guests, but I don't do that anymore. I just kind of go use without like paper guides. So like what's your process?
I'm very different than you. I research very heavily and prepare questions. I want my guests to feel like I know them and I've done my homework. So I really like to show up, having read their books and having researched them, and really having a flow of the
Hmm.
conversation.
Hmm. What about your book? Because you said at the beginning that you wrote a book or are writing a book. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm writing my third book, and it's based on research that I did with 1,286 professionals who either manage mental illness, who are managing autism, ADHD, ADHD, OCD, learning differences, people whose brains are wired differently, and how they have faced their careers, both challenges and strengths, and what has helped them in their careers from work. I really want to know what managers and workplaces can do that really helps people who work differently, who might show up differently, but are really ambitious and have a lot to offer.
Hmm. So like when writing a book, so like how do you sort of know what to write and then how it's supposed to go? Because I like wrote my first book and I have to say it was really hard. Like I didn't know like how it was gonna flow or like what my outline or vision was gonna be. So what was that like for you writing books?
What was your first book about?
Um, my first book was about it's called Disabled and Proud, available on Amazon for those who are interested. So anyway, that book is about fictionalized topics based on my own experience as a disabled person. I have cerebral palsy. So,
Mhm.
and I talk about that in my book extensively with fictionalized characters and kind of use my own experience with that. So,
So it's like auto fiction. It's your
y-
story, but
yeah, auto
fictionalized.
fiction, that's a great way to put it.
I didn't make it up, but it is.
Yeah. Uh,
Um, yeah.
So
So
like how do you go about writing books like do you what's sort of your process similar to the podcast question?
um, I'm on my third book. I just, I write a lot. I write every day. I interview people. I do research. I can't not write. I'm always writing. So I decide that it's going to be a book when it's something that I can't stop thinking about, and I feel like I have something that will be helpful to the audience. I mean, there's a lot of books out there, so it's not like the world needs another book, certainly not another leadership book, but I hope that my books address um, a corner of the leadership market that is a little underserved, and not specifically address that often.
Hmm. And so, like, what have you learned in doing this kind of work, both in like public speaking, the podcast, the book, and feel free to like tackle it however you'd like.
What have I learned? I mean, I've learned
Hmm.
so much. It's hard, it's hard to answer that question. It's the joy of my life to do this work. I feel very blessed, and I just I've learned that everybody has a story, even people who look, quote, perfect on the outside, like they've got it all figured out. Your insides don't always match your outsides, and everybody has a story.
Hmm. And like, what do you still hope to learn in terms of something new? Is there anything on the horizon that you're curious about or that you're wanting to learn more about?
I mean, there's so much. I'm super curious about AI. I want to learn more about AI. I want to learn more about how AI is affecting our emotions at work and our emotional relationship to work, and the values that we have in relation to our work. So I'm really curious about AI in the workplace specifically.
Yeah, I'm very curious about like AI specifically in terms of like education and how like stuff and like reports and how it's involved in academia. So similar in those areas, but yeah.
Hmm.
Um, and is there anything that you sort of take away that other people can learn? Like what can they do to sort of do the type of work that you're doing?
Um, Anybody can do the kind of work that I'm doing. I don't have any um, specific, I don't have a doctorate. I just, I use my lived experience as well as my many years in the workforce, leading teams, running a business, and, my curiosity and my research to really hopefully help drive a different narrative around mental illness, specifically in the workplace.
Hmm. And what can people do to learn more about you or your work?
They can go to my website, morraam.com, or they can listen to my podcast, The Anxious Achiever.
Hmm. Yeah, and I'll make sure to include that in the notes so that people can figure out where to find you. Yeah.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right. On that note,